In other business news, sentiment among South African manufacturers has dropped according to the latest Absa Purchasing Managers Index. That's as the PMI has slipped back below 50 points in March as a result of declined business activity and new sales orders. The figure now stands at 49.2 points from the 51.7 points recorded in February. Economist at Absa, Sello Sekele, speaks to us about this. Thank you so much for your time. Sello, reading below 50 points is not positive, but at 49.2 points, it's not too much of a dismay. Talk us through these numbers.
Good afternoon and thanks for having me. So, yeah, you're correct. So a figure below 50 basically means that business conditions in the manufacturing sector worsened in the month of March. And when you look at why that was the reason, demand was weak. Output also declined, and then we saw inventories also falling, and quite interestingly, we also saw supply delivery times declining. So for us, declining supply delivery times is not a bad thing because recently they've been rising as a result of supply chain bottlenecks. So what it means to us is that bottlenecks have eased on the supply side in March. And another interesting development is that an employment index increased above 50, which suggests that there was some job creation in March. But we don't think that will be sustained, especially with the weak activity.
Not too bad of a picture, but the near term, as you are outlining there in the latter part of your statement, is not positive. So what is expected in the last couple of months of the early months of the second quarter of the year, particularly because we've got challenges in South Africa, the alarming crisis that is electricity as well as logistics?
Yeah, so I would like to talk about an index which does not form part of the PMI itself, but is part of the PMI survey, and it measures sentiment among manufacturers. And what we saw is that more manufacturers are confident about business conditions in about 6 months' time. And when you look closely why that is the reason, it's because of the easing load shedding intensity that we've seen certainly in the first quarter of this year, as well as what it looks like, normalizing port activity. So, for example, the delays in ports around December were around 11 days, but when you look in March, it was around 5 days. So there is some cause for optimism, honestly, that is justified and that we are seeing coming through via the numbers.
Optimism, always a good thing, but is there a correlation between sentiment and actual activity within the manufacturing sector in the country?
So the correlation is quite low because optimism is a function mainly of expectations, right? So you can expect things to be in a certain direction, but we know that things don't always turn out how we want them to be, for good or for worse. So because of that, that's why you will see the correlation, being quite weak.
The parting shot now, Sello, let's also then try to figure out how the manufacturing sector is looking at an election year. Is there anything to be said about activity maybe slowing down? Because it's not only South Africa that is going into elections. Almost half of the world is going into, a season of choosing next leadership.
Yeah, so what we don't see in the responses is how manufacturers are thinking about elections. But as I said, it looks like what matters for manufacturers mostly is what's happening to fundamentals of growth in South Africa. So as I said, the load shedding story and the port issue or normalizing port activity seems to be a bit better. Therefore, helping manufacturers' sentiment for about 6 months' time.
And so we leave it with Absa economist Sello Sekele. They're talking to us about the latest Absa Purchasing Managers Index. It's seen a drop to below 50 points.